So another component of lock-in is it's not just the product itself that you're locked into. Usually there's a vendor layer. So you start buying other things from that vendor. So then it becomes even harder because you're using so many pieces of their portfolio. If you think AI, now you're layering AI into the mix, which then is going to lend itself to another piece of AI, because that vendor, Microsoft, Salesforce, so forth and so on, they're going to be your AI vendor, your go-to AI vendor. So now there's the optics of and the legitimacy of the lock-in just through that move.
Welcome to Insights for IT Negotiations, a podcast by UpperEdge, a leading IT sourcing, negotiation, and project execution advisory firm. I'm John Belden, UpperEdge's Chief Research and Strategy Officer.
And I'm Kylie Chisholm, UpperEdge's Marketing Manager. Join us every other week as we share insights to help you maximize the value of your key IT relationships. In each episode, we'll delve into the topics that matter most to IT decision makers and sourcing professionals.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Insights for IT Negotiations. I'm Kylie Chisholm. I'm UpperEdge's Content Marketing Manager. I am joined today by one of our advisory practice leaders, Adam. Adam, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Love to hear it. Today we are talking about a very pressing issue, something that's it's an underlying theme in a lot of the content that we produce. It's cloud vendor lock-in. I feel like even on this podcast, we've spent a lot of time talking about it and how much of an issue it is for customers, how influential it is for customers as they're navigating their negotiations. So we figured we'd take a moment to double tap on that and talk a little bit more about it in detail. What is it? How do customers end up with it? And how can we avoid it? So with that, let's jump right in. What is cloud vendor lock-in and why has it been talked about for as long as it has and as often as it has?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm glad, this is the topic for today. Because you're right, it's always an underlying theme. I think sometimes it's been talked about a lot, but I also think just because it has been talked about a lot doesn't mean it's still not relevant. So, personally, right, I've been doing this even before the UpperEdge days. When I was at AMR Research, Dave Blake, myself, and others, it was more on-premise, and there was still a lock-in component because the maintenance contracts, and then once you implement a product, and it's tough to move off of it. And so that's really what vendor lock-in is. It's simply, I have a solution for which my business relies on to run the business and or a valuable sales and field service and marketing, whatever it may be. It's an important application. In the cloud world, in software as a service specifically, it becomes even more lock-in susceptible because, one, you don't own anything, right? So when you do a contract with Salesforce, or you move to Oracle Fusion or SAP Rise or Microsoft 365, so forth and so on, E5, various editions, you don't own the software anymore. You are subscribing to it. And this has been going on. This isn't like a new concept, right? But what I'm saying is you get locked in because you can't go anywhere, right? It's very, very hard to move off. And so these customers feel locked in, right? They feel trapped in a lot of ways. And that's why when you have a subscription deal, it's important to try to get provisions and things that carry on at your renewal date. But just to kind of, before we go much further, it's also really important to think about, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, this idea of lock-in. Even though the McDermotts of the world want to get up at the Knowledge Conference and talk about software as a service is going to be dead soon, and it's all going to be about agentic AI, that's all well and good, but software as a service isn't going anywhere, not for a long time. And so that, coupled with the fact that as you move to AI offerings, I would argue that this lock-in concept elevates. If you are going to take the time, the commitment to the dollars to put yourself out there to make these types of investments in AI, put your literal business on the line, it's going to be even harder because what are you going to do? You're going to put all these dollars in, all these commitments. It's going to have change management issues. You do this with AI. You've put your ducks in that pond. Executive level, C-suite level, there's a reliance on this solution. Microsoft Copilot, Agentforce has different pricing models, which some content's going to come out soon about. Now Assist, so forth and so on. It's going to be incredibly difficult to now go back up to the board, back up to the C-suite and say, hey, you know what? We made that decision to start using AI. Maybe we got rid of some employees, or maybe we've done some things. But by the way, now we want to switch vendors. It is not, that is career suicide, and that's not going to happen. So the point here is this concept of vendor lock-in, locked to a solution, locked to a provider. Now more than ever, it's an older concept, but now more than ever becomes that much more important. The other thing, Kylie, that's really important for the audience to know is that if you think about lock-in negatively, if you think about it as a defeated mindset, that's also problematic. So what I'd like to do, especially today in the minutes we have here, is to also make customers understand that there's things you can do. Like, it doesn't have to be negative. Lock-in also means you're locking the vendor in, which means if you get them to do the right things, you're locking them into commitments that they should be giving you too. It's a two-way street. So in other words, don't think of it as negative, even though there's problems. The mindset change could also be very beneficial for customers.
My brain kind of went in two directions. You're welcome to shut down either direction if you want to. Number one is that I think something unique with AI is not only are you relying on it from a functionality standpoint, but with AI, companies are having to teach the LLMs how to understand its business. I'm experiencing this with my own work here at UpperEdge. So it's like once you've trained whatever agentic AI you're using to understand your needs and what you want, switching over to another vendor and redoing that whole training with the LLM becomes that much more difficult.
Not to jump in, exactly right. Like, that's a huge component of it too. Right? I look at it's like there's an effort in that your organization has to do. The data part to it, right? Scrubbing your data, making sure your data is accurate. All these things. You put all that time and effort into it. To then say, oh, I'm moving to someone else. Like, it's going to become less and less practical. The other thing, which you said, which is a great point, is that as you roll out and adopt, my theory would be that likely will mean you're going to do more with that vendor as well. So another component of lock-in is it's not just the product itself that you're locked into. Usually there's a vendor layer. So you start buying other things from that vendor. So then it becomes even harder because you're using so many pieces of their portfolio. If you think AI, now you're layering AI into the mix, which then is going to lend itself to another piece of AI, because that vendor, Microsoft, Salesforce, so forth and so on, they're going to be your AI vendor, your go-to AI vendor. So now there's the optics of and the legitimacy of the lock-in just through that move. It's not to say that you can't go somewhere else for other pieces, but the wider your net becomes, and AI being a component to that, including upgrades. So a lot of these organizations, to get the AI functionality, you need to upgrade. So by upgrading, you're increasing your spend, but you're also tying yourself again to a product set, which is going to be harder to move off of because you're in the most robust edition. So let's say there's other pieces in that edition now that you don't want anymore. You still have to stay in the all-in because you need the pieces at the top. So that also is problematic.
Did you know that UpperEdge offers subscription advisory services? This on-demand solution provides essential benchmarks and market insights specific to your business needs precisely when you need it, empowering you and your team to make informed decisions for your IT initiatives. Position your team for success. Reach out today via the link in the show notes to learn more.
And then it's interesting. I was having a conversation with one of our other expert advisors on a blog that he wrote back in 2013 on the cloud, just to orient the audience for how long we've been talking about this. And he was talking about how at the time he was predicting how the cloud would alter the landscape moving forward, because now people didn't own their data centers, they were subscribing to their vendors' data centers. So it was interesting to hear you talk about that aspect, because it's been a long time. It's been, that was 12 years ago that, we were talking about that and what we were seeing coming. So it's been over a decade, and also like the grand scheme of the technology landscape, it really is very new to see it like very much evolving towards agentic AI and what we'll see there. So,
but if you could fast forward in time, I guarantee you that a lot of what we're going to be talking about right now, and we are talking about, is going to be relevant then as well. Like this concept, and that's why I wanted to make sure we talked about this. I know you and I, maybe the audience doesn't know this, but like we talked about this. Like, what do we want to talk about? A lot of it's driven by what would be relevant, but two, like what's pressing. The funny thing about this is it's relevant and pressing historically, current day, and I think moving forward.
So those are my tangents aside. We'll get
Love
back into the meat.
tangents. Love some good tangents. Love a
So
good tangent.
what are some tips for overcoming vendor lock-in, or to your point, having it work in your favor?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the whole thing. So there's some key things. Number one, I'm a firm believer in, especially when you're thinking about executive level conversations, right? Again, it doesn't have to be during a negotiation. It could just be a checkpoint, quarterly checkpoint. I think there's an element of like, just let's put our cards all on the table. Let's just be honest with each other. Be honest with the vendor, right? Hey, look, Microsoft or Salesforce or ServiceNow or Oracle, doesn't matter. Hey, let's just be honest. I'm not going anywhere. You know that, right? Now, maybe there's pieces of what I buy from you that maybe over time I could find a replacement and we could do something like that. But generally speaking, we're not going anywhere, right? We all know that. But here's what I can't have happen. I can't have, when I get a proposal or renewal proposal, I can't look at it and feel like you are taking advantage of the situation. We got to work as partners. So that's the first thing. Establish the understanding that everyone in the room knows I'm locked in. Let's work with what we got. But there's a two-way street I'm expecting. The second piece is, yes, you may not be able to go anywhere, but the vendor should be able to still give you flexibility with what you have, right? Perfect example, swap rights, exchange rights. So I may be all in with you and I can't go anywhere, Salesforce, but I'm using Tableau, Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud, Field Service. I'm using all these pieces. If on one piece of my business, Sales Cloud, I don't need as much anymore, but I need more Tableau or MuleSoft, I'm still stuck on the umbrella of Salesforce. I'm locked in, but you need to let me swap things. You got to create some flexibility, right? That's number one. Number two, protections. Renewal protections is first and foremost. So what's going to happen at your renewal date? Caps on increases, so forth and so on. I would highly, highly recommend pushing heavily on not just a protection, but making sure all those conditions that they typically keep in there, like you have to maintain a spend, you need to maintain products, you need to maintain a volume. Push those out. Try to push those out because that's going to give you some flexibility on the dollar amount. Again, you may still be locked, but you may not lock to a cost profile. I think the other piece to it is due diligence. Like, look, at the end of the day, as I've talked about, you may not be able to go completely away from Microsoft or completely away from Salesforce and others, but maybe there's slices. So maybe with Microsoft, you don't need unified support anymore. So you don't need the support element. So build time so you have time to evaluate alternatives, internal conversations around, are we open to moving to a different support? Are we opening for Sales Cloud, Salesforce? We're moving off of Marketing Cloud. Are we open to using HubSpot? Like, can we get internal buy-in? Evaluation from a cost perspective, alternatives, change management. Give yourself time. Because again, you might be able to move off. But if you wait, the vendor knows that. Like, they know, like, yeah, okay, you're going to move off. No, you're not. You don't have time to do that. So, get out of here. So give yourself time. And I'd say the last point, tip of sorts, it goes to what I was talking about earlier and you mentioned, right? Change your mindset. Like, honestly, like, it may seem a little fluffy, right? And we're UpperEdge, and we have data and benchmarks and coaching and strategy, of course. But I'm a big believer in mindset. I think a lot of times I get on these calls and I sense and I feel that defeated mindset. Like, we have no choice. We have to renew. We're going to have to accept the 10% uplift. Like, yeah, no, you don't have to. And what I mean by mindset is it piggybacks up off of that kind of executive conversation, the partnership discussion. There's an element of this which I think is they now owe you something. Change your mindset. It's not about you owing them something because you're locked in. They're locked into you. Talk to them that way. Look, Salesforce, we're locked together. We're together on this. And so what do I mean by that? Give you a perfect example. We're connected, which means you, sales rep, have to sell me more things. I know that it's not good enough to just keep my current portfolio. You're locked into me, which means you have KPIs, you have expectations, you have to sell more stuff. You're locked into me just as much as because it's not good enough for me just to renew. So what does that mean? Okay, if you ever want me to buy more stuff, here's what you got to do. Correct this, right? So you're holding them somewhat hostage and locked into the fact that because you're a long-standing customer, that rep needs to grow your revenue. Flip it on them. I might do that for you if you do this. And by the way, you can't walk away from my account. You can't say, oh, they're not going to add any more. No, you have to grow me. Just like you think I have to renew, you have to grow me. If I don't want to grow, too bad for you. Or let's work together. It's all about mindset in that case. It just is. Like, put that in front of them. Like, I'm locked into you. You're locked into me.
And I think that's such a important part of UpperEdge's value proposition is the fact that we focus so much on those relationships and so much on coaching organizations through that mindset shift. You know, we've never been, we care obviously about achieving good deals and achieving good savings, but that's never been the end all be all. We must achieve these savings at any cost. It's always, how can we make this strategic?
Especially with this issue, if you don't get customers and customers don't approach the situation the right way to get the right intern protections, downstream protections, flexibility, investment, volume discount structures, if they don't get these things, all of these things at which address vendor lock-in, if they don't get these things, like, we're going to get a phone call.
Yeah.
Like, hey, yo, where were you at? Like, I appreciate the additional discounting. That was great savings. But, like, I'm sitting here 2 years in and, like, I'm in a real bad position.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. We wouldn't have been in business for 15 years. We wouldn't be doing what we were doing if we didn't do that. And I think customers on this topic specifically, like the customers that feel trapped, they feel locked in, like there's ways to use that to your advantage. There are ways to still get a good deal. Don't just give up. Just don't.
Yeah. And then we kind of started to talk about this a little bit, but to go deeper, as you think about AI and all the AI offerings that are out there, do you have any thoughts on how vendor lock-in will evolve in the context of AI adoption?
The piece that I would just add to this, a lot of it is, and I've been talking about this a lot, and you and I have been talking about this a lot, it's the consumption-based license model that comes with AI. Mm-hmm. Not all of it's consumption-based, right? But most of it is. I mentioned Agentforce, that pricing actually changed, but it's still consumption-based. It still is. And so what that means is this. When you are using a product that's not necessarily headcount, so Bobby has a subscription, Theo has a subscription. If it's consumption-based, it's not people. So all it is once it starts being used, right? Number of conversations, number of interactions, number of assists, and the wheels start spinning, and your business is relying on the thing that's spinning, right? And if it spins a lot, sometimes the business is happy because it means it's doing a lot of good work. You have to pay for that work. They like it. Well, as this thing is spinning at an incredible pace, to stop it from spinning or to reverse it and slow it down, the business is like, what do you do? What? It can't stop. That's driving our business. So that is lock-in at an extreme. The other component is it's going to be really hard to negotiate at a renewal if you don't get your house in order pre the renewal. The flexibility, the volume, the definitions, all of that. Because what's happening now is that you are so tethered to it and it's somewhat uncontrolled. You are even more beholden to the vendor, because what's to say that they don't go, okay, we now want to make a conversation cost this much more, or an action count this much more, an assist count this much more. If it's spinning, not driven by a person, it's even harder to come in and change things, i.e. get out of or correct vendor lock-in.
Yeah.
It just is. And it also goes back to what I said earlier. Now I'm thinking about it even more, and you mentioned this. If you make the leap, like your company is like, I'm going with Google, I'm going with Microsoft, I'm going with Salesforce, AI, you tell your investors, you tell the market, you tell your employees, they're our brand, we vetted this, we believe in them, they're going to bring us to the next level, their AI solution's the best. And then what, a year later, you're like, whoa, we're going to change it up. Like that, they can't, that lack of confidence could be crippling. And the vendor knows that too. So if you don't have that consumption thing figured out, plus with that coupling it, the vendor lock-in concept is actually going to become more front and center, more painful, more of a challenge 2, 3, 4 years from now.
It's such a pivotal point in the market right now. And also, to your earlier point, this is an issue that has been here for a while and will continue to be here. So even as we feel that pivot in the market, we still need to take a step back and think about what are the tactics that we need to use to solve this problem in a similar way.
And I think part of this too, as we think about AI, honestly, is that, it's an interesting point in time. We talk a lot about this, and I put stuff out there about the earnings calls and all this good stuff. And I was at the conference, Knowledge's conference. Like these vendors are also telling the market, the financial community, look, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
Like we're getting momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And once the momentum starts, we're going to make a lot of money on this. All you investors are going to be excited. But where I'm going with this is, if we use this period of time right, while ServiceNow and Salesforce and Microsoft are trying to close deals, if you address these issues, these challenges, these things that come with vendor lock-in as table stakes for these vendors to win your business, you have a period. We're in a unique period of time where that honest conversation can happen, and it could be fruitful for the future, right? Like it could actually be beneficial for you to both be locked into each other.
Well, thank you, Adam. I think this was a really insightful conversation. Like you said, we talk about this all the time, so it was fun for me to double tap on it a bit and talk about it and talk about how it's evolving in the market. So I really appreciate your insights. And with that, we will chat with our audience in our next episode. We hope you found it enjoyable.
Thank you for listening to Insights for IT Negotiations. This episode was hosted by John Belden and Kylie Chisholm and produced by Mike Brown. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode. For more information on IT sourcing and risk management strategies, visit UpperEdge.com and subscribe to our monthly UpperEdge newsletter. Thank you for listening.